Thanks, Drew, and thanks to the Depot for having me. Thanks everybody for joining today. So my name is Will. I'm the head of sales at Fleetio. I'm coming up on 5 years that I've been with the company. Officially, I was employee number 12 at Fleetio, and now we are about 90 people. So grown pretty steadily over the last 5 years and experienced, typical, well, not typical, but I think aspirational startup growth of roughly 100% year over year since the time that I've been involved. And certainly wanted to touch on some of the tactics and strategies that have helped us grow by that clip over the last couple of years today, as well as sharing some ideas specifically around how we've found success and been a bit more nimble or iterative in our sales approach during COVID and now the economic recession. So I'll go ahead and share my screen so we can hop into a slide deck, and I've got a formal sort of introduction slide I can share there. Looks like I'm getting a message: host disabled attendee screen sharing. Maybe somebody needs to give me access.
CC, if you do that.
There we go. All right, you guys should be able to see my screen. I won't ask, but if you can't, just let me know. But as I mentioned, just wanted to talk a little bit about selling in now what is a completely digital world, at least for the most part, but specifically selling in a pandemic, in a recession. I'm pretty sure that I'm not alone in this, but I've certainly never sold in a worldwide pandemic before. Certainly never managed a team in a worldwide pandemic before, and I certainly hope that I never have to do it again. But obviously this is a great learning experience for anybody that's going through this. And what I like to tell my team, and certainly what I take to heart, is this is a great opportunity for resume building criteria. Any job you're going for in the future, or any sort of confidence boost that you need, just think back to COVID-19 and what you accomplished during that time. And I'm certain that you'll gain some confidence and some momentum just thinking through what you've been through and what you've gained as part of this experience. So first and foremost, wanted to formally introduce myself and tell a little bit more of my story and why I guess you're listening to me today, or why you should listen to me today. I don't know that I can answer that question, but I can at least tell you a little bit about my background and history and what has helped me find success in partnering with Fleetio and collaborating with the team there over the last few years. So for me, this goes back to, at least my professional career goes back to 2008 when I graduated. So when I got out of college, first thing that I did was I started a business with my college roommate at the time. We founded a company called iThink, and this was right during, not the initial e-commerce boom, but really when sort of the mom and pop e-commerce boom started to happen, when everybody was putting things up for sale on eBay and Craigslist. And it sort of just became more and more commonplace throughout sort of the internet world. And so what we would do is a lot of consulting on best practices. We even had, sort of a retail wholesale business where we would sell things. We both went to Alabama. So we would sell, Alabama fanfare merchandise and things of that nature. So it was really a hobby. Didn't really know what we were doing. We paid the bills for a couple of months, but ultimately we knew we weren't going anywhere with it. So had to get a real job. And so from there, I started looking around and found Daxco, which I'm assuming everybody being in Birmingham is familiar with who Daxco is. Sort of up until recently, the software darling of Birmingham. And now we have an incredibly comprehensive and extensive startup and technical ecosystem here in Birmingham, which is something certainly to be proud of. And obviously Innovation Depot is right at the heart of that. So I started at Daxco in customer success, primarily focusing on customer support. So reactive customer support, basically when folks were unhappy or running into issues. And then as quickly as I could, I moved into sales and just worked my way up the ranks on the sales team. Started out, doing transactional deals, couple $1,000s in ARR, annual recurring revenue, and then ultimately worked my way up until I was able to participate and sell, $1 million deals, the ones, the whale hunting complex negotiations that take 12 months to close, but ultimately it's a big win for the entire company once you convert them. And what I learned from that experience was, first off, starting out in support is how to be empathetic to the customer experience, and also how important it is to have product knowledge. I think everybody has heard or even experienced a sales process where the salesperson seems disingenuous, seems like they don't necessarily know the product, or seems like they don't really know you as the customer. And I'm willing to bet that that was not a positive experience for you. So starting in customer support really helped me lay a foundation for thinking of the customer first. And I personally think that that really helped me by leaps and bounds once I actually got into selling. So had a good run at Daxco, incredibly grateful for my experience there, but ultimately just got the entrepreneur itch once more, left Daxco, actually rented an office space in the Innovation Depot. I don't remember our office number, but we were really close to the loading dock. So Icebox Coffee moved in pretty close to where we were, and so we always got the smell of Icebox Coffee when they were moving things in and out. But we had a small office in Innovation Depot, founded a company called Breeze, and what we did was primarily focus on government. And what we tried to do was make it much easier for you to renew your car tag or pay your property taxes. So in my opinion, I'm biased, but great business idea, but incredibly difficult industry to sell into. So anybody that's sold or is currently selling to governments understands that there's a lot of red tape. There's obviously a lot of politics. There's slow moving sales cycles. They beat you up on price, but once you get in the door, it's really sticky revenue. So all of that was attractive for us, but we knew that we really couldn't get the flywheel spinning without raising money. And at the end of the day, I think we all decided, myself and my co-founders decided that we just weren't passionate about the idea. So lucky for us, we got some attention from some of our competition, and we were able to sell the business in 2016 and move on to other things. So that's what brought me to Fleetio, where, as Drew mentioned, I was the first sales hire and was really brought in to provide some professional and formal sales process to the team, as well as start to put some structure in place so that we could scale the team to where we are today. So to give you some insights there, we started with a sales team of 1. We have 16 today. And we went from basically being sort of a jack of all trades team to now being a specialized team. So we have different segments, SMB, mid-market, and enterprise. So basically going from small to large. We have different specializations in terms of the roles. So we have a sales development team that does prospecting work. We have a closing team, account executives that actually work and close the deals. And then we have a management team that obviously helps to kind of steer the ship and drive strategy on behalf of the sales team. So I've been with Fleetio since 2016. As I mentioned, we've grown from 12 employees when I started to 90, just short of $1 million in revenue to now well beyond $10 million in revenue. So experienced some really exciting growth. And now, we're aiming for, 10xing where we are today. So definitely have our eyes on, $100 million in annual recurring revenue, potentially IPOing or exiting and getting acquired by a much larger company. So everybody at Fleetio is an owner, so we all have skin in the game. We all have shares in the company. And so we're all aligned on what the end game is for the company. The other thing I wanted to mention briefly is that I also participate with a group in town called Shortcut. So this is myself and a few others that specialize in go-to-market strategy. And this is more or less of a hobby or side project for us that we do on nights and weekends, where we help startups basically establish a go-to-market engine. So don't think of this as really heavy-handed consulting. It's more that we have sort of pre-built playbooks that you can take and buy from us and then put to work right away. So really just trying to accelerate getting the plane off the ground with respect to a sales process in the modern world. So certainly if anybody's interested in getting some help, more than happy to have a conversation with you and let you know kind of what we do there and if it's of interest to you. So that's my story and ultimately what's brought us here today. So really what I wanted to do is spend a few minutes. I've got a short slide deck to go through with you guys, and this is more just to kind of keep me on track, but definitely want to leave some time for some Q&A at the end. But I certainly welcome you to interrupt me all throughout the presentation if you have any questions or want me to dig into anything a bit further. But going back to kind of presenting 101, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So these are the things that I want to cover with you today. So whatever you're up to today, I don't know what that is, but I can guarantee it's not what you were doing in January. So the world has changed. We've been hit by COVID-19. We've been hit by a recession. We're going through these cycles of feeling optimistic about the future to pessimistic about the future. So lots and lots of things have changed. That's caused or forced everyone to sort of rethink their strategy. So to that end, wanted to share some ideas on, in my opinion, what really matters now. So what are the most important things for you to think about in a digital sales strategy? And then finally, I don't think this would be a worthwhile use of your time if I didn't give you some pragmatic ideas or some tactical ideas that you could take with you. So I'm going to give you some thoughts and some things to think about that hopefully you can take back to your team, whether it's a team of 1 or a team of 100, that you can put kind of sit around the table, brainstorm, digest, and ultimately decide if it's a good fit for you and your business. So we'll talk some tactics. And then again, if you guys are still with me at the end and have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. All right. So first and foremost, what has happened over the last, it's July, so 7.5 months. So, a lot of things happen. And these are probably things that you guys have all realized, heard on the news, talked about. So I'm probably not sharing anything new with you today, but just to recap these to ensure that, we all acknowledge that this is the reality, is that, first and foremost, there's been a major acceleration of technological adoption. So, I'm sure everybody heard about or even followed the Zoom IPO earlier this year, or Slack. All of those tools basically stepped in a honeypot and caught lightning in a bottle with COVID-19, where everybody had to figure out how to talk to each other, how to meet in a professional manner and collaborate in a remote capacity. So you had companies that weren't necessarily thinking about these things that were now forced to think about these things. So we've essentially accelerated that market, that industry, that approach, I don't know, by 10 years, something like that. But there's definitely been an acceleration of adoption of technology for just day-to-day business. The other thing that's happened and happened rapidly, likely a lot of this process is done, but is likely being reevaluated at this point, is disaster planning and budget cuts. So, what's the saying? The best time to get on an airplane is right after an airplane crash. So COVID happened. If you had a plan in place, you used it, or you used it and then you audited it to ensure that it was a good plan in the first place. Or if you didn't have a plan, you certainly put one together. So with COVID hitting and the recession looming and then actually coming into play, everybody realized that they needed a backup plan or a contingency plan when these sorts of things happened. So either folks put that into practice or they started thinking about it and started writing these things down so that they'd be prepared for the next time that something like this happens. The other thing that happened, and this is something Fleetio went through, and I'm sure you guys had some similar considerations for your own business, is you had to make budget cuts. So everybody had to sort of tighten the belt and understand what was going to be critical to the business versus what was a nice to have or a luxury item. So that goes into things like evaluation of your current staff, of the current technology that you're using, of the strategy that you have in place. Is what we were doing on March 8th still applicable or relevant on March 9th? When COVID hit. I remember that because my birthday is on March 8th, and it was that Monday that Fleetio shut down our office and everything sort of hit the fan. So, everything changed in a day and everybody was uncertain about what the future held. But one thing was for sure is that everybody needed to ensure that they could weather the storm. And that meant that they were looking at things and reevaluating who's working for us, what technology we're using, and what strategy do we have in place, and do we need to reevaluate those things? And lastly is more focus on cost savings and profitability. So I don't know if, I don't know who's on the call today and kind of what your situation is, but if you have investors or if you have folks that have put money into the business, likely you got some guidance from them to really, really focus on being cash flow positive and being profitable so that, for many months to come and however long this thing sticks with us, that you can weather the storm, keep the doors open, keep payroll running, and ultimately survive as a business. So there's been much more of a focus both in companies that have private equity and VC money, all the way down to just bootstrapped companies, to ensure that they're pinching pennies and saving where they can, but ultimately focusing on being cash flow positive month over month and a profitable and healthy business. So I say all of these things, again, you've likely realized this, you've read it, you've seen it, you've talked about it, but these are all of the things that you have to consider and put yourself in your customer's shoes when you're talking with them. Which leads me to the next thing and the first big concept that I wanted to share with you guys, which is how essential is your product? And I mean this, you have to be honest about this. You have to, again, put yourself in your customer's shoes, put yourself around that table where they're making considerations or decisions on what budget line items are going to get cut versus which ones are going to survive. Are you one of the ones that's on the chopping block? Because I guarantee you, In that meeting, you're a line item on a spreadsheet, and the bigger the dollar amount, the more scrutiny that you're going to receive. So what we talk about at Fleetio is this word is essential. So how essential is your product or your platform or your solution to the day-to-day operation of your customer's business? So before we talk about that, we have to understand what essential means. So for us, the way that we describe this is, I'm stealing this directly from one of our product managers who I think put this together really, really eloquently. But essential products are ones that cannot be removed. They have to be replaced. So essentially, essential products are not nice to haves, they're must haves. These are things like your accounting system. In some businesses, these are things like your CRM. So products that you cannot get through the day, get through the week, get through the month. You can't operate or function as effectively or as efficiently as you could with that product. So I would just encourage you to digest this, whether you use the word essential or not. You have to understand how important your solution is to your customer's business and how ingrained in the day-to-day process you are in your customer's business. So some things to think about in terms of what essential means. So some ways that we've thought about it and consider it, and certainly some ways that I've seen other companies sort of weigh this out, is daily usage. So if I'm logging into your product every single day, you can probably guess or bet that it's pretty important to my day-to-day operation, versus if I'm logging in once a week or once a month, it's probably not that important to me. So how often are folks logging in and actually using or engaging with your product? This, of course, is suggestive that you're selling a software solution or you're selling a technical solution. But either way, if it's not a technical solution or a software solution, how often is your product getting used? So first and foremost, you have to make sure that you can measure this. So do you have metrics around this? Are you paying attention to this? And if you're not, I would encourage you to start doing so, because this is a really, really important thing. You know, when Facebook and Twitter came on the scene years and years and years ago, we started hearing about DAUs and how usage really plays into the valuation of a company. Well, in today's world, it's incredibly important just strictly for adoption and retention of customers. So make sure you're measuring this and make sure you have a good handle on how often your product is getting used. The other thing that I would suggest is a key factor to being essential is cross-departmental value. And really, this sort of leads into the third bullet point with respect to integrations. So if you have a standalone product that's strictly for the sales team, that's not going to be as valuable if it's a product that the sales team uses, but then the data from it feeds over to finance and operations. Or if you have, Asana, I think is a great product, great example product. We use Asana at Fleetio. For those of you that don't know, it's a project management tool. It's basically a task management tool. We use it for everything from one-on-ones to OKRs across the business to roadmap and feedback sessions. So literally every single person at Fleetio uses Asana. The business will close before we cancel our contract with Asana. That is the definition of essential. So your customer is going to have a much harder time ripping out a product that is used on a daily basis, that multiple departments use, that's integrated into multiple workflows, or even that's integrated into multiple products. So if you have a product that's integrated with Salesforce, your CRM, and QuickBooks, your accounting platform, and Asana, your project management tool, all the better. It's going to make it much, much harder to cancel that contract and to pull back. And then finally, sort of the sheepskin when it comes to selling and product value is, are you driving revenue or are you reducing cost? What is the ROI of your product? So just some things to think about when you determine how important, how vital, how essential your product is to your customers. And again, these are the things that you can frame your messaging, your value proposition, your positioning statements around. If you don't know the answer to these things, again, I would just make sure that you're measuring it, but call your customers, email your customers, ask them for some feedback. Are we essential? Are we providing value on a day-to-day basis? What do you think the most important thing about our platform, our product, our service is? And those answers should be pretty telling. So make sure you're leveraging your customer base for feedback on these things. All right, quick pause. Any questions? Any feedback? Anything you guys wanted me to dig into more before we move on to the next section?
It's great so far.
Cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about Asana for the one-on-ones. Do you have a format you use for that, or you just use it as a review?
We do. So we have basically the way that we break it up, and this is going to be different based on the different departments that are using it. But for us, generally, we have a framework, a template in Asana that kind of has a framework for us on how we run one-on-ones. So first and foremost, we do one-on-ones every single week. It's non-negotiable. That's set at the company level, and you have to do a one-on-one with your manager for at least 30 minutes every single week. We also view that or define that as the employee's time, not the manager's time. And this is any salespeople on the call can relate to this. Oftentimes it'll turn into a pipeline review or to a forecast review or something that's super self-serving to the manager. That is not the point of a one-on-one. The point of the one-on-one is to give the employee time to talk about team relations, to talk about culture, to talk about career path, to talk about anything that's on their mind. And then with any time that's left over, you can focus on more tactical things that are, again, important to the manager. But the way that we structure things in Asana is we basically have new topics, standing topics, and follow-up items. And then we have a reference section for any documentation or Word documents or Google documents that are relevant to topics that we're discussing. But new topics is essentially where the manager or the employee can add things that they want to talk about ahead of time with any notes so that everybody can be prepared. Standing topics are things, again, I'm a sales guy, so things like forecast, things like planning, things like career path, comp, things that you're going to talk about every single time. And then follow-up items are just actions or takeaways. We talked about this, we need to go talk to someone else about it, and then follow up on this to ensure that it gets done. So we have basically a template or a framework that we set at the company level that then each manager takes and makes it their own.
Thank you.
Sure. I'd be happy to share more details on that for anybody that would be interested after the webinar as well. So just let me know. Okay, next section, what matters in a COVID sales process? So a lot of these things are going to be things that matter in a non-COVID sales process, but there's certain things that are more important today than they were before. So first and foremost is going to be the perception of both your brand and your people. So I don't remember who said this to me originally, but one of my friends that I worked with early on in my career always told me that perception is reality. And that couldn't be closer to the truth. I mean, the perception that you have of someone or something is your reality. So whether it's true or not, it's what they believe. So this starts with your assets, your website, your documentation, what customers say about you, and ultimately it feeds into the experience that your prospective customer or your customers have with the people that are driving that conversation. So if you haven't taken the time post-COVID or during COVID, whatever stage we're in right now, after COVID hit, you haven't taken the time to reevaluate your website or your digital presence, I would definitely do that because as everybody knows, I should know this, but I forget what the stat is, but X% of a customer's evaluation is done before they ever talk to you. And that's because of the internet. So I would make sure you've reevaluated your website, reevaluated your LinkedIn, your Capterra reviews, your G2 crowd, anything where your brand is represented online, give that a look and make sure that's representing the appropriate perception that you're looking for, that you're shooting for. Same thing with your people. So do you have a good LinkedIn profile? Do you have a solid headshot? Are people being professional on phone calls and on demos and on Zoom calls? So this definitely feeds into the next bullet point, which is, what's in the light. Basically, can I search for Fleetio in Google and what can I find? So if you haven't looked at it, you need to know that your customers are looking at it. So it's worth your time to kind of scour the internet and figure out what all is out there that you know about and that you don't know about, and ensure that it's putting a good perception out there. Same thing with your people. Once people get involved, I wholeheartedly believe, and anybody that's talked to me before about sales has heard me say this, but I didn't make this up, but wholeheartedly believe in the old adage that people buy from people, and people buy from people that they like and trust. And in the old days, in selling face to face, when I could sit across the table from you and you could read my body language and we could shake hands and you could get a sense for my sense of humor or whatever, is a completely different ballgame. But in today's world, I'm formulating opinion about you before I ever talk to you. And so that perception, that brand image starts before they ever pick up the phone or you get on a Zoom call. but it's incredibly important that that carries through to the Zoom call and the sales process once a human being is involved. So that's also, you know, the customer experience. We are incredibly passionate about the customer experience at Fleetio. And, you know, one of the other sort of success stories, well, the major success story over the last couple of years in Birmingham being Shipt and their exit, you know, Bill Smith is well known for being obsessed with the customer experience. And I think this is something that modern companies that are very, very successful just do a really great job at. So this is everything from the time that I'm introduced to your brand to the time that I pay you or sign a contract or whatever that conversion event might be. Everything that I'm going to go through has to be top notch. Everything from the form that I fill out to the automated email that I get when I complete that form, to the first email that I get from a salesperson, or the first phone call that I get from a salesperson, to the demo experience, to the trial experience, to the first time I actually put my hands on your product and use it for myself, to the handoff to customer success, to the billing emails, to the invoice that I get. You know, everything matters so much. So I would just say, think about the customer experience, put yourself in their shoes, and try to understand what are the steps that they are going to go through when they're trying to buy from you, and ensure that the worst thing that you can do is have a great product, a great price, but then a really bad experience and somebody doesn't buy you because of that. Don't let that be the problem. Let people buy you because you have gaps in your product, because your price is off. You can at least work on those and improve those, but the customer experience is something you have to get right. And then lastly is ROI. And I put this in you know, the perception of ROI because, you know, oftentimes ROI is sort of fabricated anyway. You know, there's very few industries or products that can articulate a concrete ROI that is going to be the same or you know, quote unquote guaranteed across different customers. So just ensure that you have good talking points around ROI. And this doesn't necessarily mean that give me $1, I'll give you $1.50 back. These could be things like soft benefits or intangible ROI, things like redirecting your staff to focus on more meaningful activities, or freeing up bandwidth so that you can research more. You know, you can get creative with this, but make sure that you've got some sort of return that the customer is going to get from your product. You know, basically sales 101 kind of stuff there. Okay, so those were external things that matter, internally things that matter, and just some things that we've spent a lot of time investing in at Fleetio over the last couple of months is first off, communication and community. So we were a remote company to start. About 30% of our company was remote when COVID hit. Post-COVID, we were 100% remote. So we were pretty well prepared in terms of the products that we used, you know, Zoom, Slack, so on and so forth, to collaborate, but we had to do some new things just in terms of day-to-day stuff to ensure that our company and our teams stayed connected and were able to extend and continue collaborating like we did in an office environment. So a few ideas, you know, we started doing daily check-ins, so daily coffee talks and happy hours as we referred to them. So right when COVID hit, twice a day, my team would hop on a Zoom call, first thing in the morning and last thing at the end of the day. We're not talking about anything. There's no agenda. You didn't have to join if you didn't want to, but it was just a good opportunity for everybody to see each other's face, talk, and just, you know, make sure that we maintained that human connection. The other thing is, you know, let people into your life if you're comfortable, of course, but let people into your life. You know, when COVID hit, I was working at home with my two young daughters, and it was pretty routine that somebody would be crying or screaming in the background. You know, people's dogs are barking all the time. So, you know, these are things that are more forgiven or more accepted in a COVID world. And I think internally, you have to let people into that because it helps just bolster that connection and bolster that human feeling that we all have for each other. And if we like each other better, if we feel more connected, if there's more rapport, that's only going to help with collaboration. And that's the other thing, is that you have to focus on collaboration. So for us, again, we use Zoom, we use Slack, we use Notion, we use Asana, and we're really, really diligent and religious about writing things down. So, you know, in terms of communicating well, when everybody can't be in the same room or you don't have your weekly staff meeting in the same way that you used to, write things down, have a place where people can go find the answers to things that they need, because they may not be present for a given day. They may be on the Zoom call, but maybe they've got the screaming daughter in the background and they didn't hear what you said. So make sure that you have a way for your team to consume that information asynchronously. Next is expectations. So, life is about good communication and expectations. I think you have to ensure your team knows what the expectations are during COVID. So with respect to sales and sales quotas and what's going to get you in trouble with respect to performance versus what is stellar performance during COVID, you just have to set those expectations. And that starts at the company level with what you're trying to achieve in a given year, and any adjustments you may have made to your forecast or your goals for 2020, just make sure you communicate that down to the team or whoever's involved in sort of the go-to-market strategy. So just setting expectations and making sure that you've got a good plan. I think for us at Fleetio, we are still very startup minded in the sense that we change a lot and we iterate a lot. So my team knows that we have a plan. My team also knows that our plan is subject to change, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. So having a plan, setting expectations for what the plan is, and also setting the expectation that the plan could change. Anybody that tells you they know what the world is going to look like in Q4 of 2020 is lying to you. Or if they do know, then I'd love to talk to them because I'm very, very curious myself. But set the expectation, have a plan, and then reiterate the expectation that the plan could change. Okay, super tactical stuff, super like nitty gritty detail stuff that I think matters a whole lot. So the small things, we have a saying that goes back to, there's American Sniper, and then there's another movie that said this, but that doesn't matter. Aim small, miss small. So we say that internally at Fleetio all the time. Aim small, miss small. It was the Patriot and American Sniper. So aim small, miss small. If you set a smaller target, you're more likely to hit that target than if you set a wider target. So this is sort of, the fundamental of golf. If you aim for a speck of grass on the green, you're more likely to hit that speck of grass versus if you aim for the entire green, you're more likely to miss it. So these are the small things that may seem like minutia, but matter a whole lot when it comes to that customer experience. So first and foremost, if you're working at home, you're not working in the depot where you've got a great internet connection, but you're working at home, make sure you've got an internet connection. You don't want your sales folks or your customer experience folks hopping on Zoom calls with choppy internet or where the audio cuts in and out. I know for me, when I'm on conference calls and that happens, and I really hope this hasn't happened on this webinar, but if the audio's choppy or the video freezes up, it's just frustrating. It's annoying. And those are the little things that you don't want to get in your way of converting a customer. Again, let it be about product gaps. Let it be about pricing. Don't let it be about an internet connection. So make sure you get that right. Same thing with camera or website imagery. So make sure that they're high quality images. Make sure that, if you're using, in my case, I'm using a MacBook Pro, there's a pretty good camera on it. Hopefully the picture is pretty clear today. So if you're going to share your camera, and I absolutely encourage you to do that because again, people buy from people. And if I can see your face, I'm more likely to have an affinity for you. I'm more likely to build rapport with you. And it's just harder to say no to people that you have a face relationship with. So I encourage you to use your camera, but if you're going to use your camera, make sure it's a high quality one and that the image is good. Same thing with lighting and background. So I could, spin around right now and have my window in the background of me where I'm going to basically look like I'm in the witness protection program versus having this lamp right in front of me where hopefully there's a good bit of light on my face and you can see who I am and see my facial expressions and so forth. So make sure your lighting is good. Make sure in the background, you have something that looks, it's just, respectable and somewhat clean. Don't do it from your garage where you've got your lawnmower in the background or whatever, or, maybe don't do it from the beach if you want to be taken seriously and ensure that, you're in a professional environment. So just be aware, be cognizant of what you're surrounded with and what your folks, what the person on the other end of the phone is seeing if your camera is on. So lighting, background, those things are small, but trust me, they matter a whole lot. Last two things really play hand in hand. So first off is confidence. You can't be aw shucksing your way through a Zoom call. So you have to be confident in what you're saying and what you're selling. Buyers pick up on that and buyers want to be a part of something that's certain, especially right now. Again, we just talked about how there's a ton of uncertainty in the future. So if I'm uncertain about what the future holds for me and my business, but I am certain that your solution is going to help me, that's a pretty good place to be. So that all starts with being confident in the solution, being well prepared, being well versed on the product or service that you're selling, and going in there with some gusto. and selling it with some energy and some confidence for sure. And that's the other thing is, you have to be passionate in what you're saying. So if I was talking to you guys right now and, I was kind of monotone and seemed bored with myself, you're going to check out, you're going to drop off the webinar. You're certainly not going to listen to me. You're going to start checking email or whatever in the background. So energy matters a whole lot. Tone of voice matters a whole lot. And yes, even though we're on a Zoom call and we're not sitting in front of each other, body language matters a whole lot. I used to work with a really, really smart lady who always had the best practice of putting a mirror in front of you when you're doing a webinar or a demo, whether or not you're sharing your video. And the reason that she would suggest that is that you can see your face in the mirror, obviously, and she would always encourage people to smile, because when you smile and you're talking, it's very, very different than if you're frowning and talking. So you have to have energy. Body language matters. If I'm slumped over or if I'm crossing my arms or if I've got my hands on my head, those are things that customers pick up on. So, put a mirror in front of you, or at least remind yourself from time to time to smile while you're talking. That's going to show that you're confident in your solution, that you're energetic about your solution, that you're passionate about your solution, but most importantly, that you're just happy to be in the room. If I feel like you don't want to be here, then I don't want to be here either. So all of these things are really, really small, tactical, minutia type things, but they all matter a whole lot when it comes to customer experience. All right, quick pause for any questions, and then we're going to hustle through this last one. But any questions or anything you guys are curious about?
I don't have any questions, but you've mentioned a lot of great, software. So I don't know if after this you can share some of your stacks that we can share with some of the attendees. Yeah,
absolutely. Maybe at the end, I can kind of just rattle through our list of things that we're using today.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anybody that has questions, feel free to let me know.
Thank you.
Sure. Cool. So this is the part where hopefully I can give you sort of a menu of ideas to take away, consider with yourself or with your team, and then put some of these into practice. If you're not doing these things already, which I imagine you might be doing some or all of these things, but if you're not, certainly consider doing them because they've helped us in a post-COVID world. So first and foremost, I'm sure everybody's familiar with ICP, or Ideal Customer Profile. This is something that is even more important right now. So you have to understand what industry. And for us with Fleedio, we started doing this and paying much more attention to this at a really opportune time. We started doing this back in October of 2019, and then really started nailing it in early 2020. And then of course it became much more important once COVID hit, but you have to understand what industry your solution is intended for. And, for us, we're in the fleet industry. Virtually any company that has a vehicle as part of their, their profile, if you will, is a potential customer for us. It's incredibly easy for us to get distracted. It's incredibly easy for us just to want to be sort of the jack of all trades or the solution for everybody. That's not a good idea. It's really hard for me as a salesperson to say that, but that is not a good idea. You have to be disciplined on your ICP. And this is something I work incredibly closely with Lori Sullivan, our director of marketing at Fleedio with. We talk about this all the time and we scrutinize this all the time. So we have 3 specific industries that we sell into. We have dozens and dozens of industries we could sell into, but we pick 3 and we focus on those. Within those 3 industries, we have 3 personas that we sell to. So these are things like, for us, the owner, the operator of the business, the VP of operations, the fleet manager, the fleet admin. And we have different messaging and talk tracks based on which persona that is. The reason that this is important is it's going to ensure that the customer experience from beginning to end, from Google search to website to sales demo to follow-up proposal and email communication, is all saying the same thing. It's impossible to manage that across 24 different industries, but if you have 3 of them, you can do it pretty well. And then having the same messaging or core messaging for the different personas that you're selling into. And if you can do that, then you can understand what's working and what's not. If salesperson A and salesperson B are both calling into in my case, a fleet manager and saying different things, one of them converts and one of them doesn't, then if we're using the same messaging, maybe it's a matter of tone, maybe it's a matter of approach. But if they're both saying 2 different messages, we can't really measure what's working and what's not. So you have to identify your ICP, you have to be disciplined on your ICP, and then focus on a very select group of industries and personas that you sell into. I would highly encourage you to base this also off of where you're having success today. The caveat that I'm going to throw out there is the second bullet point, which is paying attention to macro trends. So if your ICP in January of 2020 was the airline industry, I would encourage you to pivot. So you have to pay attention to, and one thing that we've really done a whole lot since COVID hit is, watching more CNBC, paying more attention to the newsreels, trying to figure out what's happening in the stock market with company valuations, revenues, layoffs, all those types of things can give you an indication of who's going to be around in 6 months or who's going to be striving, thriving, or surviving in 6 months. So paying attention to those macro trends. I'll give you an example. When COVID hit, one space that we've always sold into is landscaping. And when COVID hit, I would have told you that discretionary income is not going to be spent on people getting their grass cut. I would imagine that'd be the first budget line item a family would cut out because they can spend that money on something that's more important. Landscaping has actually been booming since COVID hit. So it's odd to me. It doesn't necessarily make sense. And if I just went with my gut feel, we'd be missing out on a lot of business right now at Fleetio. But by paying attention to macro trends, paying attention to the industry data that we're capturing in our CRM, we were able to understand that was a good place to be and a good place to double down on during COVID and well into the future. So pay attention to the macro trends that you see out there. Referrals, you gotta ask for referrals. I mean, this is one thing that every salesperson says they do, but very few of them actually do it. So the best time to ask for a referral is as soon as you close a deal. So as soon as you close a deal, ask who else do you know? Who else do you think would benefit from this solution? Hey, if I gave you a $25 Amazon gift card, could you introduce me to somebody? If I gave you a month free of our solution, could you introduce me to somebody? The hardest thing about sales, in my humble opinion, is getting meetings. So the whole prospecting exercise. If you can make that easier on yourself and ask somebody that already likes you to make an introduction on your behalf, you're only going to be able to grow faster. So ask for referrals, build this into your culture, build this into your process, and make this a non-negotiable. This is still something that Fleetio needs to do better, and we talk about a lot, but it's something that we focus a lot on and spend a lot of time talking about. Next is considering COVID in your pricing strategy. So going back to the beginning of the presentation and talking about how everybody's focused on profitability, on cash flow, on tightening their belts and being more careful and disciplined with respect to budget, know that pricing is going to be an objection. In my experience in selling into multiple industries, pricing is always an objection. We could have the most fair pricing in the entire world, but somebody's got to push back. So more often than not, you're going to get the pricing objection, whether you prepare for it or not. One thing to think about, and this depends on your business model. This depends on your cash position, your liquidity as a business. So I can't give you an end-all be-all strategy today on this presentation. But what I would encourage you to do is think about how you can make it really, really easy for a customer to say yes. So these are super easy, fundamental ideas that everybody uses. So we haven't made anything up here at Fleetio, but some things that we've been doing are offering ramped pricing. So, your first month that you're going to have a 75% discount. The next month, you're going to have a 50% discount. Next month is 25, all the way up to 0. So make it easy for a customer to transition onto your platform. And if you can do that with an instrument like pricing, it really helps to kind of, grease the skids, if you will, and get them converted as a customer during a time where budget matters a whole lot. Other things is, can you delay their billing date? So with Fleetio, go ahead, we'll invite you to the platform, start using it today. We're actually not going to invoice you until October. That'll get you through your budget cycle, make it super easy for you guys to get started. And, by the way, this will make the solution even stickier. Folks are using it day to day. And by the time you have to actually cut us a check, you're not going to want to get rid of Fleetio. So just consider COVID, consider budgets in your pricing strategy. But most importantly, consider it on the front end. So make it super easy for a customer to say yes and just get started. If you've got a good product and you're confident in it, if they just get started, they'll likely stick around. And then ultimately stay open-minded and open to change. So get feedback from your customers. Did you like our pricing? Did you like this structure that we put in place? Did you like our idea that we proposed? The answer is yes, no, maybe so, whatever it is. Take that, use it, digest it, and then consider that in your strategy moving forward. All right, some other just really quick best practices. So this is your pipeline ratio. So again, this is certainly not something I've made up, but is fundamental to software sales specifically. But it just in general selling, you want to make sure that you've got a 3-to-1 ratio of pipeline to your quota or to your goal. So I would definitely encourage you, specifically since COVID hit, to really scrutinize your pipeline and make sure that the deals that you have in there are legitimate. If you want to sell $1 million in 2020, you need to have $3 million in pipeline. And that's for a really good sales team. Really good sales teams close deals 33% of the time, win deals 33% of the time. So by easy math, you need to have $3 million to close $1 million. So pay attention to this. And again, for all the reasons that we've already discussed, make sure you scrutinize this and audit it for legitimacy. Other things that are, again, just sales fundamentals and data that can be, widely found on the internet is that typically it takes 18 touches to reach a buyer. 19% of buyers are going to want to connect during their awareness stage. So this is after they know about your product, but they're not necessarily ready to make a decision yet. So, 1 out of 5 people are ready to talk to you and willing to talk to you when they've just started to get to know your brand. That's a whole lot less than we ever considered in the early days. 20% want to connect during their decision. So 1 out of 5 people want to get all the way to the point where they're ready to negotiate price before they want to talk to you. So again, this just kind of leads back to that whole customer journey and customer experience and the perception of your brand that starts with your online presence. They're going to, in this case, 1 out of 5 people are going to do all of their evaluation before they ever give you a chance to pitch your product. So you gotta nail the customer experience. You got to nail the top of the funnel customer experience specifically. Just hustling through this. So align your process with your customer. So again, just think about what that customer experience is. Think about how your customer buys. So in the fleet space, we don't have a lot of folks that are on LinkedIn. There are some, but in general, we're dealing with folks that are out in the field a lot. It's skilled trades and so forth. So a lot of times they're not necessarily digital buyers. The phone works really well for us, whereas email might work really well for you. You have to know how your customer buys things and how your customer communicates. You need to align your process with how your customer behaves. Secondly, and almost as importantly, again, you may be a sales team of 1 today, but thinking about your comp plan and rewarding the behaviors that are going to move your process forward. So you have to align your process with your comp plan and ensure that you're incentivizing your sales staff to do the things that you know are going to lead to the conversions that you want. So don't comp on phone calls if demos are a more meaningful activity. Don't comp on demos if what you're really after is secured revenue, which of course that's what we're all after. But most importantly, you want to comp on the behaviors that actually lead to success. So ensure that you're aligning your process with your comp plan and vice versa. Okay, just some other things like COVID fundamentals and things that you just cannot let slip through the cracks. So for me, in sales, no doesn't mean no forever. And definitely during COVID, no doesn't mean no forever. So for us at Fleetio, we have marked or tagged or labeled every single deal that we've lost during COVID where we got the response that COVID was the reason. So, hey, you want to buy Fleetio today? No, you know what? COVID's really hit us hard. We're not really sure when we're going to come out of this, but it's not you guys, it's us. We may want to revisit this in the future, but it's not sure right now. So we need to tag that deal and circle back around to it later. So I would make sure that any opportunities that you're losing right now because of COVID, you've got a really solid plan in place for how to circle back around to those and get them back into the funnel later on. If nothing else, drop them into a nurturing campaign and just continue to build that brand credibility while we're all dealing with COVID and its impact. But no doesn't mean no forever, unless they explicitly tell you no, of course, and like unsubscribe. But no doesn't mean no forever. Make sure you've got a good plan for recycling opportunities and recycling leads later on. Next up is follow up and follow through. So, I've always said that, a lot of selling is just like parenting. You don't necessarily have to do like the over and beyond stuff. Like a lot of times good parents just show up to the baseball game or they're helping them do homework or whatever. That's generally sales. Like customers just want to know that you're going to be there to help them through. You've got to have a good solution, but they want to make sure that you pick up the phone, that you send the email that you said you're going to send, that you did the research that you promised you would do, that you connected them with the referrals or the reference customers that you said you would. So follow up and follow through. You are setting the expectation and setting the perception of what it's going to be like being a customer of yours in the sales process. So you have to ensure that your sales folks are living up to that and setting a good experience from day one. And then lastly, these are the things that keep me up at night and just make me super annoyed with how a lot of sales folks approach their process. So 50% of people never follow up. So 50% of people are not doing the bare minimum of the gig. Frustrating. Like don't shoot yourself in the foot. 10% of people don't make more than 3 contact attempts. This is also annoying because if nothing else, I could be the dumbest guy in the room, but if I'm tenacious, I've got an opportunity to earn your business. I can guarantee you I am not the smartest guy in the room, but I have found success in the past simply by being persistent and staying in touch until somebody tells me no. So again, no doesn't mean no forever, and silence definitely doesn't mean no. So until you get the response that you're looking for, and that could be a yes, could be a no, could be a maybe, keep trying, keep sticking in touch. There's plenty of technologies out there today that help you ensure that you're following up and following up often. And then finally, 80% of decisions are made between steps 5 and 12. So if you're only making 3 contacts, you're not even giving yourself a chance here. So again, make sure you're following up, make sure you're giving the effort that it deserves, and make sure you're actually getting to the point where most of the decisions are made in buying processes. And then finally, leads are perishable. So this is sort of sales common knowledge as well, but there is plenty of data and statistics out there that show that once a lead expresses interest in your business, the longer it takes you to follow up them, the longer it takes you to engage with them, the less likely you are to convert them. So this just, again, goes back to that customer experience that is so paramount, that you have good systems and processes in place to know that if you are lucky enough to have somebody reach out to you and ask about your product, that right there on the spot, you can engage with them and get a conversation started. Same thing with outbound. Again, those are a little more reluctant to engage with you, but leads do die on the vine. Don't let that happen. Every single one of those things is incredibly valuable, and you put in a lot of work to get that lead. So make sure that you follow up with it, make sure you engage with it quickly. And again, these are just the easy, fundamental shortcuts that can help lead to more success later. And then finally, timing is everything. I'm sort of just beating the dead horse here, but March might not have been a good time for folks to buy from you, but October could be a good time. So just remember that. Don't get discouraged. Make sure you have a good plan in place of how you're going to follow up with people, because again, it may be no today, but tomorrow it may be a yes. So timing is everything. Keep that in mind. Don't get discouraged. Stay persistent. Do the fundamental things right and follow up. And one day the timing will be right. Lastly, this is my contact information. This is my LinkedIn. This is my personal email. I had mentioned before that, I've got some side projects where I do some consulting work with some colleagues of mine to help folks put a go-to-market engine in place. You don't have to expect to pay us anything to get some help. So I love, Drew can tell you this from past experiences. I love talking about sales strategy. So I'll take a phone call, I'll grab a coffee with you, I'll talk shop with you, and would be happy to do that without any sort of commercial commitment. But we do have more formal arrangements in place if you are interested. But if I can help you, if you want to brainstorm at all, please reach out to me. I love talking about those types of things. And I think we've got like a minute or so left. So really quickly, just because CC asked, so the Fleetio tech stack, and I'll be happy to answer any questions about these after the fact. You guys just shoot me a note. But the Fleetio tech stack today, we use Salesforce as our CRM. We use Outreach as our sales engagement platform, which that's the one that ensures that I actually do the 12 touches or 15 touches to actually get in touch with folks. So we have a very structured and rigid outreach program that Outreach facilitates for us. We use Zoom for conference calls. We use Asana for project management and one-on-ones and cross-team collaboration. We use Slack for communication, both internally and externally. We use Zoom Info for lead enrichment and data sourcing. And we use Gong for call recording. Gong is a fantastic tool. There's a variety of them out there, but basically what Gong does is it records all of our phone calls, and it tells you really cool things like how much I talk versus how much my audience talks. How many times did I say things like discount or or like or things like that. So it's basically a way for, it's great for training purposes just to record calls and then use them later on. But it's also a great way just to use data points from calls that you have in one-on-ones and coaching sessions to ensure that you're always improving. Okay. We're like right on time. Maybe we got a few seconds left. If there's any questions, I'd love to answer those before we wrap up.
Well, this is very, very good and very timely. And as you mentioned earlier, you really are very helpful and approachable. And so I highly recommend anyone to reach out to you. And Fleetio obviously has it figured out, and you've been a big part of that success. And so, as I mentioned earlier, our goal here at the Innovation Depot is to take that blueprint of what you guys that are doing successfully and show people how to do that. So appreciate you taking time out today and show people and tell people about what you guys are doing successfully.